Clock Tower Quay is a popular tourist destination in the old port of Montreal, especially following the installation of an urban beach in 2012. Overlooking the deadly St. Mary's Current, it is an ideal place to spend a sunny afternoon, safe on the shore. However, several people have spotted wet footprints on the quay, even on the hottest days when water evaporates very quickly. As the sun beats down on the pavement, the wet footprints remain, unevaporated, baffling the tourists who visit. Could these paranormal prints be related to a maritime disaster from the city's distant past? The island of Montreal/Diosha Quay has hosted maritime and port facilities since the ancestors of today's Canny and Kayaka, Mohawk, people settled it over 8,000 years ago. With the island being surrounded by rapids, it was necessary to establish docking areas to unload canoes in order to portage goods around the dangerous waters. When the French colonized the island in 1642, their port facilities were very rudimentary. Wooden docks were laid out along the shoreline, but could not provide a harbor for larger ships. Instead, smaller rowboats were lowered to bring people and goods to the shore. When the city capitulated to the British in 1760, plans were made for a major port expansion. In 1830, the Montreal Harbour Commission embarked upon a 20-year plan to develop a world-class port where large ships could dock on various quays that extended into the water. Passenger service of paddle-wheel steamboats began operating between Montreal and Quebec City, with the Victoria Pier in Montreal employed to load and offload passengers. Following World War I, Montreal-based engineer Paul Leclerc designed the clock tower. It was built between 1919 and 1922. At a striking 45 meters high, it marks the entrance to the port and also serves as a memorial to sailors lost at sea in wartime. Upon its completion, the wharf was renamed Clock Tower Quay. Always a popular sight with tourists, who can climb to the top up a set of stairs to an observation deck with great views of the river, the site was enhanced in 2012 with the addition of an urban beach. While swimming is not allowed due to the deadly currents, guests can enjoy a sandy beach while relaxing under blue parasols. One American tourist named Billy Serif visited Clock Tower Beach in July of 2021 and was impressed. This is a great place to spend the afternoon suntanning while watching the boats on the river. The only weird thing was a series of wet footprints on the quay that I noticed while approaching the beach. It was a very hot day, and I knew that swimming was not allowed, so I wondered where they came from. Sarif continued. What was even stranger was that the same footprints were still there after I had spent the afternoon lounging on the beach. I tried soaking one up with my towel, but it just reappeared seconds later. Sarif is only one of many visitors over the years who have spotted the wet footprints on Clock Tower Quay, leading to speculation that something paranormal is going on. Upon hearing about the mystery, a Montreal-based psychic decided to visit the quay to see if she could determine the origin of the haunting. After much interrogation of the site and intense meditation, a date sprang into her mind, Saturday, June 27, 1857. According to the Montreal Gazette on that date, the scene on the Montreal waterfront that Saturday morning was horrifying. 12 little children lay huddled in death on the deck of the steamer Napoleon. Beside them were the bodies of a young man, a teenage girl and 2 women worn with the toil of the world, mothers perchance. The day before, the worst maritime disaster in the country's history had occurred. Over 250 people, mostly Scottish immigrants, had died upstream from Quebec City at Cap Rouge. Their voyage had begun on May 18 when they boarded the John Mackenzie in Greenock, Scotland. Bound for Quebec City and beyond, over 330 skilled immigrants were on board, including mechanics, farmers, weavers, and other professionals. With families in tow, these immigrants were hoping to make a new life on the other side of the Atlantic Ocean. After a tedious journey, the John Mackenzie arrived in Quebec City on June 25. The passengers disembarked and found lodgings for the night. The following day, approximately 250 of the Scottish immigrants boarded the paddle-wheel steamer Montreal at 4 p.m. with the upriver destination of Montreal City. Others stayed in Quebec City or took the train to Montreal. The Montreal departed on schedule with Captain J.C. Rudolph at the helm and 300 passengers. About an hour later, Rudolph spotted the steamer Napoleon ahead of him at Cap Rouge. Even though the Montreal was an older vessel with a history of engine fires, Rudolph ordered the crew to add more fuel to the boilers in an effort to overtake the Napoleon. These types of race were not uncommon for bragging rights and to save time and money for the company. The Montreal's engine room became dangerously overheated, and 2 small fires broke out. A crewman doused them with a bucket of water, but within seconds a 3rd flame erupted, this one much deadlier than the first 2. Indeed, within minutes, the whole ship was engulfed in flames. Captain Rudolph tried to steer the ship into the shore to give its passengers a better chance of surviving. However, it got snagged on a rock about 250 meters from the riverbank. The Montreal began to break apart as the inferno raged. Passengers began hurling themselves into the deep and fast-flowing waters, many of them on fire. Because most of them could not swim, they were doomed to drown in the swirling St. Lawrence River. Some were even killed when struck by pieces of lumber being thrown overboard in an attempt to give them something to cling to in the river. The Napoleon immediately turned around and tried to rescue as many of the passengers as possible by throwing out ropes and lowering its lifeboat. One woman from Edinburgh named Margaret Bloomfield managed to catch hold of and cling to a piece of rope with one hand. During the fire, she had lost two of her children, aged 11 and 5. However, she also saved the two others, aged 1 and 9. She held one of her daughters above water with the other hand and used her teeth to hold onto the clothing of her last child. According to the Montreal Gazette, so heavy was the load that two of her teeth gave way and were lost, yet she still retained her hold. In total, over 250 people drowned and approximately 50 others were rescued by the Napoleon. Meanwhile, Captain Rudolph managed to swim to another steamer, the Alliance, which rescued him. The Alliance also collected dozens of bloated corpses floating in the St. Lawrence River near Cap Rouge, including men, women and children. While Mount Herman Cemetery near Quebec City received most of the bodies for burial, Mount Royal Cemetery in Montreal also donated a plot to inter several victims of the Montreal. Montreal's owner, John Wilson, faced a lot of scrutiny following the tragedy. Earlier in the season, the insurers of the steamer condemned it and refused to supply future insurance. With a long history of boiler fires, the insurer simply deemed the derelict steamship as unseaworthy. However, John Wilson still kept it running on daily trips between Quebec City and Montreal. Prosecutors put the reckless Captain Rudolph on trial, but the judge ultimately acquitted him. Within a year, he was back on the river despite having killed so many people with his foolish decision to try to overtake the Napoleon in his derelict vessel, the Montreal. Most of the Scottish emigrants who survived would eventually return home to Scotland as very broken people whose dreams had been dashed. Families were ruined and survivors were devastated. Are the wet and paranormal footprints found so often on Clock Tower Quay related to this maritime disaster and tragedy? It is certainly worth more investigation.